was sort of explaining IVC to me, I just got so excited. I just really love the mission here of integrating service and spirituality, um, at all stages of life and especially in retirement. And I'm just so excited to be with you all today, and hope that I have something that to share and that will be beneficial and fruitful for you.
Catherine, I just want to jump in real quick. So in preparation for this, I went snooping around in my own world, and I found my eighth grade journal. It's got
Yes.
pictures of dogs all over it. It has a wolf from Zoo Books, and this was my entry into journaling. We were Miss McKenna, may she rest in peace, had us work on our journal every morning, and um, this is where I started in journaling, and this is as far as I got in journaling. And so I'd love your feedback and thoughts on this. So September 14th, 1992. Dear Jesus, we always had to write to Jesus, Catholic school. Dear Jesus, thanks for a great summer. This is going to be a good but hard year. Love, Steve. September 16th. Dear Jesus, I hope the year goes quickly. These days are getting longer and longer. I hope I can beat my Nintendo game in under 50 games. September 17th, 1992. Dear Jesus, nothing much is happening these days except I'm doing well on Nintendo. Love, Steve. September 22nd. Dear Jesus, I can't wait to find out what's going to happen on Star Trek. Love, Steve. P.S. I need help with my Nintendo game. So that's as far as I got with journaling. How'd I do?
You did perfect. You did so well. I love it so much. I think that Jesus loved hearing all of those things. I think that whatever is honestly on your heart, that is what belongs in your journal. So if it's Nintendo, put it in your journal. If it's Star Trek, put it in your journal. If it is the state of the world, put it in your journal. And anything in between. I think that that's what a journal is for. It's a safe place to put the things that are on our hearts. And to not judge the things that are on our hearts too, right? It's all worthy, because it's coming from us honestly. So thank you for being brave and sharing that. That was very very honorable
Yeah, I
of
hope
you.
if someone was like really praying for something in the fall of 1992, I hope that my nattering on about Star Trek and Nintendo didn't distract Jesus.
I love that. That's so wonderful. So if you are a journaler like Steve, if you are someone who, I think the registration form said that if they ever make a movie or about your life, that they would have an obscene amount of content to work from, or anywhere again in between. Um, I hope that there'll be something here for you, and I designed this workshop in such a way that there will be something for you to glean from it or take from it into your own spiritual practice. Um, so if it's okay, I'm going to just get into it. Um, I did make a little presentation for you all. So I will bring that up shortly. Excuse me. Great. And of course, this is a journaling workshop. So if you'd like to take notes, you're welcome to do that. But you don't have to. I did make a little sort of summary of the things I'll be talking about in this workshop that I think Steve is going to send out after the fact along with the recording. So the really big takeaways will be all printed there for you. As my introduction said, I did spend some time teaching middle and high school students. So I love a good handout. It kind of makes me feel like there was something, we could really take away from the day. So you will be receiving that, but also feel free to take notes in whatever way feels right to you, or just sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. What you can expect from today, we're going to do this workshop in 3 parts, in 3 sections. So for the first part, I'm going to offer a few tips, tricks, and ideas for integrating journaling and Ignatian spirituality. A lot of my work as a theologian in grad school, as a teacher, and now as a writer and a speaker really centers Ignatian spirituality and the idea of a sacramental imagination, finding God in all things. And I think a journal is the perfect place to record those observations, however they come to you. So I have a lot of different ideas or offerings, suggestions for how to integrate those two that I'll be offering to you. Then in the second part of our time together, I'm going to give you 3 specific journaling prompts and the gift of time. So we'll probably spend 10 to 15 minutes or so, kind of depending on where we're at, actually journaling in a journaling workshop. Because I think one of the best ways to get started is to actually get started and to do it, and to practice it, because it is a practice. And the more you do it, the more comfortable you will feel with it, and easier it will be to find your way into journaling, the way that works best for you. And then at the end of our time together, there'll be a chance for questions, comments, debriefing, a talk back, sharing whatever you feel comfortable. No pressure to share. I'm not going to cold call on anyone. But if there was something that really worked for you and you wanted to share that, or something I missed that you wanted to add, we would love to have a conversation as a large group towards the end of our time together. So let's get into it. If you are just getting started with journaling, or if you're getting started after a time away, or you're in a time of kind of maybe some spiritual dryness and feeling a little bit stuck, here are a few of my quick tips for getting started. And I will also share that as Steve and I were preparing this presentation, I did say to him, I think verbatim, that journaling has been the bedrock of my spirituality for almost my entire life. So I did come by these tips honestly. These are things that looking back over 20 or so years of journaling, that I have found really work and are meaningful. So the first thing I want to say is to link your practice to a dependable part of your day or week, or not. You don't have to journal every day for it to count as journaling. You can journal just as needed. I use my journal right now as kind of like a rescue inhaler. I don't need it every single day, but there are certain days when I really, really need it, and I'm really glad it's there, and I dive into it, and it makes a really big difference. But there's been other times in my life, or different seasons, where I have needed to journal every single day or once a week. And that rhythm of it has really helped me too. So give yourself permission to journal when it's best for you, whether that is at a particular regular interval, or, on a more as needed basis. The other thing I would like to give you permission for is that your supplies and your handwriting don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have the most beautiful, aesthetically pleasing journal in the world, although the Ignatian Companion Circle journal is very aesthetically pleasing. It can be just a scrap of paper. It can be a note on your phone. It can be the back of a piece of trash envelope. If you need to write something down, write it down. Right now I'm using a lot of Post-it notes to journal, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But it doesn't have to be perfect to get started. It also doesn't have to be writing in sentences. Journaling also counts as doodling. Journaling counts if you're just making a list, if you're free writing. I love a good dash as I'm journaling, just no periods, just phrases with a dash, another phrase, another dash. It doesn't have to be a 5-paragraph essay that you're going to turn into somebody. It can be whatever you need it to be. And then the last quick tip I would give for getting started or starting again would be just to start with some simple questions. And these are actually 2 questions that I call centering questions. They're questions that I actually use with my kids when we pray together as a family. So they're great for kids, they're great for grown-ups, they're great for teenagers, they're great for anybody can ask these questions and come up with meaningful answers. And if you're feeling really stuck in your prayer life or your journaling practice, they're a great place to jumpstart things for you. So the first one is, what is one good thing I can thank God for? I read a parenting article that said it's actually really hard for little kids to think abstractly about gratitude. And I have to say, it's really hard for tired adults to think abstractly about gratitude too. Um, so the parenting article suggested that you just ask your child, what's one good thing in your life right now? And a lot of times when I ask that question, I get answers like mac and cheese, or sometimes I'll get answers like my grandparents or my house or God. It could be anything, but what's one good thing in your life that you can thank God for? And then the other question that I like to use to center myself and I'd offer to you is, what's one hard thing that I can invite God into? And that can be a situation, it can be a relationship, it could be something that feels bigger than you to ever solve. It could feel something very interior that's a little vice or something that you want to work on yourself. What's one hard thing that you could invite God into? So those two questions are a great way to get started. They're kind of like a cheater's examine, Don't tell St. Ignatius I said that. But it's a great way to jumpstart things if you're feeling stuck or just starting for the first time. Um, so the next thing I want to talk about are three different modes for journaling, or three different ways to journal that I've used in the past. And I'm also going to tell a little bit about how I've used these modes for journaling in the past, and offer a few suggestions for if you're this type of person or if you're in this type of situation, um, this might work well for you. So the first mode of journaling that I've done in the past is I've used my journal to track spiritual data. And this I especially used in college when I was discerning, just major life decisions like, what should I major in? And where should I go for my career? And should I marry my boyfriend? I did marry my boyfriend. We're very happily married. He's working downstairs right now. Um, but this is a great way to use your journal to sort of keep track of those consolations and those desolations. So what are those situations or those relationships or those environments that are constantly bringing you closer to God, or consistently kind of taking you away from God? So if you feel like you're in a place where you need to discern something, you're struggling with a decision, maybe you want to try using your journal to track spiritual data over a series of days or weeks or months. And this can also really work well for those scientific and analytical people among us, um, who really like that data, who like tracking trends, who like that information, because it really can help to make those bigger life decisions that might have impacts down the line. So another way I have liked to journal in the past is to write a letter to someone trustworthy. And I say someone trustworthy because maybe you, like Steve, have been asked in the past to specifically write a letter to God or to Jesus. And sometimes that really works for folks. I know personally for me, when I journal in this mode, I do sort of imagine that I'm writing to God in general. Um, but that can also feel hard or overwhelming or uncomfortable in some way, especially depending on what you want to write about. So I would offer the idea of writing to anyone you deem trustworthy. And the great thing about the journal is that that person doesn't even have to be alive. If there's someone in your life that you have lost that is very trustworthy to you, you can write to them in your journal. Or someone that is close to you, that is still, with you. But you don't have to give them the letter, right? It's just a safe place, again, a safe place for that information to land. Because I've found that when I have a specific audience in mind, whether I'm, writing an article for the internet or writing something in my journal, it helps me to, um, I think more critically about what I'm writing, and shape it in a way that helps all of my jumbled thoughts and feelings to make a little bit more sense in the end. And again, in a journal, it's not necessarily for consumption, like someone's not going to actually come and read that, but it's helpful for me because then I can consume that information a little bit better and understand it better. So this was how I started my journaling journey as a teenager, when I had a million thoughts and feelings about an absurd number of things and I needed a place for them to land. And so I just started venting really to my journal. I just put all my teenage angst into my journal, and it felt great. And it was great for my spiritual health. It was great for my mental health. It was great for my relationships with my friends and family who didn't have to listen to all that. Um, but it was a really great way for me to sort of move through that rocky time, being a teenager and trying to kind of figure out who I am and who I want to be. And I remember very distinctly a couple years ago, in the throes of early motherhood, feeling that same kind of overwhelm that I felt as a teenager, of everything is different now. I don't know which way is up. I don't know who I want to be. I don't know who I am. And my neighbor next door, who's also a young mom, gave me this journal that says "Grin and Bear It" on it, and I started just pouring out my heart again. I just started going for it, writing a letter to someone trustworthy. Again, in my case, in this situation, it was God. And it felt so good and it felt so much better. And I was so much more prepared and able to kind of go back into the fray, into my daily life, because I had that safe space to really let those thoughts and feelings out. So just an idea: when you're journaling, consider writing a letter to someone trustworthy. And then the last mode for journaling that I would offer to you, or I would suggest to you, is to use your journal to create something. Use your journal to create a response. And so this can be taken in a lot of different directions. Maybe you are someone who has a regular practice, whether it's daily or weekly, of reading scripture or reading poetry. Maybe you're someone who really loves music or visual art or spending time in nature. Um, Whatever it is that you use in your daily or weekly life, to connect with God, to pray, you can then sort of take that experience and record it in your journal through a creative response. So again, this could take the form of maybe going for a walk outside, going for a hike, and then coming home and writing a poem about it. Or you could read a passage from scripture and then, like, doodle it, draw a little drawing in your journal, or make a list after you've listened to a song of the things, the memories that it brings up for you. This is kind of how I'm using my journal right now in this moment. I've recently really enjoyed praying with the Psalms. So I'll read a psalm and then I'll sort of annotate it and then use a sticky note, actually, not a journal, but a sticky note, to write one takeaway and stick it in my Bible. And that's it. And that counts as praying and that counts as journaling, because I'm taking time to, um, you know, immerse myself in the psalm and sort of spend time in that psalm with the Lord. And then I use a sticky note to journal and record, what I sort of got out of my prayer time that day. And those will be fun to look back on in the future, I think, and kind of see what God was sort of doing in me now, when I have a little bit of time and space for it. So I'm also trying to date those sticky notes, but I don't always remember. But just another example of how journaling can look a lot of different ways. It doesn't even have to be in a journal. All right. Um, so with those sort of tips and tricks in mind, I'd like to give you the gift of time right now. And I'm looking at my watch. Maybe Steve can confirm for me about how much time would be a good amount of time, maybe 15-ish minutes. And I would encourage you to choose one of these prompts. These are each based on the 3 modes that I just talked about. Choose one of these prompts and really spend some time with it and time with your journal and try it out. You're very welcome to turn off your camera and to mute yourself at this time if that would feel more comfortable for you. But the 3 prompts that I would offer to you in this time and in this space would be these. So if you're interested in tracking some spiritual data, one thing that you can do is pray and examine for today, and just simply record your answers to those questions in your journal. And then if you have some extra time after that, and you're someone who has been journaling, you can always sort of go back and look for trends and look for data in some of those journal entries that you might have written previously. But this is a great place to start if you'd like to continue this practice, on a regular basis going forward. Again, another way to journal is to write a letter to someone trustworthy. That person can be whoever you want. They can be living or dead. They can be someone you've never actually met. If you have a friend who's a saint that you feel comfortable talking to, you can write a letter to them. I would encourage you to actually start with dear and put their name in there to really sort of focus yourself on this person, maybe bring their image to mind. And then just simply express your thoughts and feelings on a topic that's close to your heart. If you are feeling anxious or overwhelmed, if you're feeling super joyful and excited about something in your life, this is a great place to just pour out those feelings. Your handwriting doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to write in complete sentences. Just entrust those thoughts and ideas to this person who is trustworthy. And then the last prompt I would offer you today is to read Mary's Magnificat, which is Luke chapter 1, verses 46 to 55. You can easily look that up on the internet, or if you have a Bible handy, you can look it up there too. And just note what stands out to you. If you've ever prayed with Lectio Divina before, you can sort of lead yourself through that process of reading the passage a few times and noting if there's a particular word or phrase that draws your attention. And then once you sort of have a word or phrase from that passage, feel free to respond to it in your journal. And again, that can take any form. You could write a poem. It doesn't have to be good. No one's going to read it. You can write a poem. You could write some prose. You could write a list. You could create a little doodle or a sketch. Anything you want that sort of, again, feels right to you, that sort of captures your experience with that passage. And I just offer that passage to you as a starting point because selfishly, it's probably like my favorite passage in the whole Bible. But if there's any psalm or poem or song lyrics that you really love and you want to pray with, or have been stuck in your head recently for whatever reason, feel free to grab those words and pray with them and then record your response in your journal. As I have said, and as you can probably tell, this time is really for you, and it's for you to hopefully use it in a way that is fruitful for you. And so you have a lot of freedom in and a lot of permission from me to kind of do what feels right. And then maybe at the afterwards, we'll have a little bit of time to talk about that and how it went as a group. So Steve, do you think 15 minutes would be good? More or less, 20?
I think it's 4:27 now Eastern. I think 15 is good because we'll have a little closing and we want to get some reactions from people. I can play some quiet music, quieter than the Beatles. Yeah.
That sounds great. And again, if you want to mute yourself or turn off your camera, if that would help you feel more comfortable during this time, please feel free. But we'll call people back to attention gently in about 15 minutes.
All right.
Welcome back, folks. If you wanted to finish up the last thought that you're working on, feel free. And again, I don't want to pressure anyone to share. So absolutely, you do not need to share what you wrote about or how it went. But I did want to give an opportunity for folks to talk a little bit about journaling. So if there is something in particular that has worked for you in the past, if you have some wisdom you'd like to add, we would love to hear it. If you have a question about journaling, I can do my best to respond to it or throw it back to the group. But I think Steve was telling me that one of the great things about IVC is that there's a deep sense of community here, and that a lot of you really appreciate and value that aspect of this organization. So we just wanted to tap into that a little bit and give you all some space to talk about this journaling as a spiritual practice, what works for you, what doesn't work for you, what you might like to try going forward. So I'm just going to open up the floor, and if you feel more comfortable typing into the chat, that's okay too, or we can just kind of get a little conversation going.
Catherine, I have a question for you.
Sure. Hi.
Hi, I'm Charlie,
Hi, Charlie.
and two things. When you started your dialogue, you mentioned how journaling made a big difference. Has made a big difference for you, and so I wrote down I wanted to ask you if you could elaborate on that. But then you kind of went on to do that, and just in terms
Okay.
of getting things off your chest, and then putting them aside and being a better person as you move forward. So yeah, if you had anything else to add in that regard, that would be great. If not, that's fine. And then the question specific to journaling is, and I'm new to it. This journal entry I just made was my fourth journal entry ever.
Woohoo.
And, I have messy handwriting sometimes to the point where I can't read my own handwriting. And as I'm kind of feverishly writing, I'm thinking about this a lot. And I know you mentioned penmanship doesn't matter, but I'm wondering if I intentionally try to have better penmanship, will that kind of slow my pace and thoughts down and allow me to better articulate my interior self? Um, uh, you know, do you find that experience? Do you think that's true? Or the other side of it is just keep writing how I do write, and I'm kind of afraid. Oh, I have these thoughts. I want to spill them out on the paper before I lose them, so I'm just going to write feverishly, and then like every fifth word, I don't even know what I wrote. So, just your thoughts on penmanship, and if I was more intentional about better penmanship, would that lead to maybe more articulated thought on the page?
Yeah, that's a great question and very wise and a very interesting hypothesis. I really like I have not thought of that. And I'll speak a little bit more to that in response to your first question, but I like that idea that, forcing yourself to slow down and write by hand, first of all, a lot of my students in this digital age would resist me when I said, you have to take notes by hand. They would think, like, who is this lady? Like, what does she know? But there really is wisdom and science to back it up about the act of writing things by hand and its connection to your memory. Um, so I think that's something really interesting, Charlie. I'd love for you to test it and see if writing slowly helps you to better articulate your thoughts. Um, or if it could possibly be the opposite. And I'm kind of more of the messy handwriting person, partly because I'm a little bit anxious and paranoid, and I'm terrified that if someone found my journal one day, like I wouldn't want them to be able to read it. Because it's the getting it out that seems to be the most helpful for me personally. Um, but you could find a middle way too, where you spend, the first 5 to 10 minutes of your journaling time just getting it out on the page and then pausing and then trying to write out, a bullet point list in nicer handwriting of 3 to 5 things that are really like on my heart today, or 3 to 5 things that I'm really thinking about, or I'm struggling about, or questions that I have right now. Kind of almost like a rough draft and a final draft, you know. This is the the messy part, and the yeah, the just getting it out, the free writing, but then these are the takeaways, and this is what I would want to be able to look back on, because that's the other thing too, is that sometimes I try to like reflect on my past and like look back on my journals, and then they're so messy that I can't. And that is a great benefit of journaling that is lost if you are just scribbling. So maybe that could be like a middle way. I've definitely going, responding to your first question too. I think for me, a lot of it is just getting it out. I have a lot of thoughts and feelings. I'm a very melancholic person. I need to like write in my journal to process my world. And so getting it out clears my mind so that I can refocus on my kids and, the other responsibilities in my life. But it also helps me to sort of see my world a little bit more clearly. I think that's it too, that a problem that seems really enormous in my head and really impossible and really a huge tangly mess, once I actually write it down, I'm like, oh, that's not that bad. I can handle that. Like, I'm brave enough and strong enough to deal with this situation. I can do this. I have the things I need. So I think that's the other benefit too, of being able to kind of get it out, but then look back on it. So write it down in a way that you can get it out, but then also write it down in a way that you can look back on it. I would suggest both. Yeah.
Hey, Charlie, this is Tom. I appreciate your honesty in confessing your sin of messy writing, because I share that. I won't even ask you to ask my wife about that, because she can't read anything I write. And it's gotten worse as I've gotten older, because I have a palsy now in my hand, so it's worse. What I have found, I have journaled quite a bit, and what I have found, for whatever it's worth, that does work for me is actually to try to slow down some. And there's a balance between. I also am a free flowing writer, and I like to get my thoughts out on the paper as they flow. So there's a conflict there, because I'm so messy. Sometimes I cannot read what I have written. So what I have learned to do that works a lot of times, not all the times, but is I do slow down. And when I when I when I look at what I'm writing, if I can't really read it, I mean, I know what I just wrote, so I can read it. But if I'm honest about it, and I say to myself, I'm not, if I come back to this in 5 minutes, I'm not going to be able to remember I won't be able to remember what I read. I am very good at not worrying about one spelling, which is a big shortcoming for me. And I don't worry about crossing out. So when I write a word that I think I'm not going to be able to read, I just cross it out and read it and write it again, so that my journal, you can't really see what I wrote, but I've got crossouts all over. You can see this right up here. I've got crossouts all over the thing. I just cross it out and rewrite it, slow it down so I can read it, and then but at the same time just keep moving. That's the way I deal with. I think the same problem that you're talking about.
Thanks, Tom.
Well, thank you everybody for allowing me to somebody give me absolution for my confession there.
Well, there you go. Yeah. This is Greg. I'm from San Diego, and I'm really grateful for being here. I also suffer from pretty poor penmanship. I'm left-handed, and I remember when I was in grade school, we were trying to write with a fountain pen. Everything I wrote was smeared with the ink, because I couldn't get myself to do this backhanded thing that most left-handers wind up doing because of that. Well, I'm a writer. That's what I do for a living. And so it's a lot easier for me to sit in front of a computer and type my journal. And, then I can go back and, I don't look, I just type away and then I look at it later and spell check tells me I misspelled 9 words and I go back and fix them. But it's been an easier way for me to do it. And I'm appreciative of this meeting today because it's inspired me to, get back in the habit of journaling. I was journaling for a long time and then I stopped, and then I journaled for a while and then I stopped. So I'm going to really make this part of my spiritual activity, along with the daily examine and a few other things that I try to do every day, because I think it's a really important part of it. And today I actually, my journaling today was, I wrote a fairly long letter to my late wife, Kathy.
Beautiful.
So I found that to be a pretty special thing to do. Never thought of doing that before in a journal. So thank you for that idea of writing a letter to someone.
I'm glad that that was fruitful for you, Greg, and thank you for sharing. And I agree too, typing, like, if that's what works, like, do it. It's better to do it in the way that works for you than to just not do it at all. So I'm so glad that you're here. And Tom, also thank you for chiming in on that. And there's no grades here. No grades for spelling, no grades for handwriting. Do what works for you.
I want to move to Barbara's question in the or comment in the chat about, sometimes when you're writing in journal and you're in that kind of the heat of the moment. We've been talking a lot about, we write and then we go back when we look at it so that we can go back. We want to go back. But I mean, Barbara's saying, like, sometimes you don't want to go back. And I would imagine that that's okay too, that the purpose of the journal isn't necessarily to have something to go back to.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel that way, Barbara. I saw your comment too, and I was like, yes, there are several of my journals that I never want to open again. And maybe there is wisdom too in potentially having, like, this is crazy for you, AP extra honors journalers, like having multiple journals, like you could have your journal that's just your, like, emotion dump journal, and that's the one that you don't look at again. And then you have your other journal that's more, for your creative responses, or your the dirty journal. I love that. Yeah. um or for your examine journal, like, this is the journal I always write in after I do my examine, or something like that. But I don't think that is odd at all, Barbara. Thank you for confessing that, because I feel that way too. So yes.
I can remember the author Anne Lamott writing about having kind of prayers or intentions or thoughts that kind of pop into her brain, and she just wants to physically do something with it, and so she'll write it down and she'll look around and she'll see like a tissue box and she'll shove it in the tissue box as if it's like putting it in God's in bin, like just to get it out and get it out.
I love that.
Steve and I had a cousin who died in her mid-40s of a brain tumor. And in the last weeks of her life, she entrusted me with her journals because she wanted her children to have them. But she and their father were long divorced, and she didn't want them to read anything negative about their dad. So what an honor. She asked if I would read through her journals and just rip out, anything that I felt like didn't pass the test. I really feel like I should designate someone to do that for my 73 journals, but that seems rather unkind. But the thing that cracked me up about her, it was a fairly substantial stack. And it turns out that every time she was experiencing newness, a new job, and a new pregnancy, and a new home, she would start a new book. So, I dig into one book and there'd be like 8 pages, and then she'd be done, and then she'd move on to the next one. And as much as that made, meticulous me be like, honey, what are you doing? That is what worked for her. She was very aspirational, and the start of a new point in her life was a good excuse for the start of a new journal.
Thank you for sharing that, Christine. That's so beautiful that she would entrust you with such an important project. And also just her awareness of kind of what she wanted her journals to be, you know, in terms of like her legacy and her kids. And I also am very guilty of never finishing a journal. I don't think I've ever made it to the end of a journal before. I'm like, I need a new one. Like this, or someone gives me one. I'm like, this one's prettier, you know? So that's okay too, to not finish one. You can always come back to it and use those pages later.
If Catherine, if I could just add an affirmation of something you said way back at the beginning when you were doing your sort of cheater's guide to the examen.
Yeah.
One hard thing to invite God into. I love that phrasing because
Thanks.
just inviting God in is such an open-ended thing. You know, it's I'm gonna need to think more about that, but that really is most days the perfect thing to do, and as much as we maybe can do in relation to the hard things in our life. We don't sit down to journal to solve it. So if we do, that's great, but rare. But to sit down to invite God in is a really beautiful thing to hold on to.
Thanks. I'm so glad that resonated with you. Yeah. My oldest is 7, so we're not quite there yet with like talking about inviting God into hard places, but she has her little 7-year-old struggles, you know. But I'm excited to introduce that to her, you know, in the coming years or two as things really, you know, get a little more complicated as she gets a little bit older. Yeah.
Well, any last thoughts as we approach the hour mark? All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Oh, Barbara wants to know what's next. Well, I have to walk the dogs, but
Thank you.
that is a great question. Thank you, everyone, for coming here. We want to keep this community going. You all, as companions to IVC, you've heard that, you know, how we are many parts of the body of Christ. Well, you are the spine of the body of IVC. You allow us to stretch, you allow us to reach, you allow us to stand. Your consistent support. I mean, we're a nonprofit, and nonprofits are businesses, and businesses need money. So your steadfast support really helps us do what we need to do, because we know we can count on you, and our partners can count on us because we can count on you. So thank you. Also, thank you to Catherine for coming here today and sharing this. I'm looking forward to more opportunities to work with you in IVC, and yeah, I think you're a great fit.
Thank you. It's been such an honor and a pleasure to be with you all today. I've had so much fun preparing for this for you because I'm a huge nerd, and it's just being with you has been really special. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It was very
Thank you.
inspiring.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Catherine. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks for coming.